Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I am Mark DiPietro. I'm the Vice President for Marketing and Communications at Landmark College in Putney, Vermont. And we're having a nice snowy night in New England tonight. And we're going to talk about our bridge experience at Landmark College. At any time during the presentation, you can ask questions by typing them into the Q&A box. And we'll be asking the questions after the presentation. We have Professor Rebecca Maddie, who is a professor at Landmark College for many years. I don't want to say how many because I don't know, but she'll tell you. And a special guest is one of our alumni, Taylor Doxsee, who attended for the bridge experience for 2 semesters. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca.
Hi, thanks, Mark. Yes, I'm Rebecca Maddie. I've been at Landmark for 26 years in a variety of capacities. And I specialize very much so in the first year experience or in that bridge experience. And so I want to talk with you a little bit today about what the bridge experience at Landmark College is like. And I feel very clever. You can see we have that awareness to advocacy, which is really, I think, the greatest gift that comes from anyone's time at Landmark. And so here we go. Let's talk a little bit about it. So what can you get from the bridge experience? Here's where we get into that self-awareness piece. A better understanding of your strengths and challenges, strategies for academic task management, and better self-advocacy skills. But better task management often comes with becoming a better self-advocate. We practice specific tips for using campus resources. So for instance, if a student is having a hard time going to the support centers, which we have plenty of, we help students script how to do that. Students come to our campus and they often have come from other institutions or they have chosen to come to Landmark before moving on to another college, specifically because they had difficulty juggling the demands, either because of time or processing speed or focusing on too many things at once is not something that works well for them. Independent living skills, that can be the other big piece of coming to Landmark College. Juggling all of those demands is something that we are fully aware of, and everyone on campus is very skilled at talking about it and supporting students wherever they may be in that process. And along with all of this, learning strengths and challenges, managing tasks, advocacy, campus resources, and juggling demands comes with better self-monitoring, which means your ability to see how well you do those things. Sometimes students know that they might have a slow processing speed, but they don't necessarily know what that means for the real life experience. How many courses can they take and how many extracurricular things can they take and how many hours of sleep that they need. So better self-monitoring is a big part of all of this. You can see right in here, learning strengths and challenges. This is all self-awareness and self-advocacy. So how does it work? In our classes, we have lessons that engage students with both the skills and these strategies. Unlike other colleges, there's some instruction on skills, but it is far more explicit and deliberate and supported at Landmark. In a bridge experience, all students will take a course that I'll talk about called Perspectives in Learning, and then the first writing course. Skills are very explicitly taught. Students are guided through those processes so that they know that they're using them. Oftentimes when students are taught skills earlier in their lifetime, they don't really realize that these are supposed to be transferred or generalized throughout the rest of their life. So oftentimes when I bring back a skill and I teach it in my class, the student will say, oh, I remember doing this in middle school. And I'm like, well, you should still be doing it. And so I teach them how to apply those very same skills to college level material. Landmark College provides an environment for students to study and forge alliances with like-minded peers. Let's talk about that for a minute. I would say we often people are looking for the special sauce at Landmark College. That's sort of one of the phrases that somebody is always hunting for the special sauce, and we've come up with lots of ideas of what that might be, but I think in my mind what that is the community that we have at Landmark. Everyone at Landmark understands what it is to be neurodiverse, and so truly, while everyone is so vastly different in how they think at Landmark College, everyone is unified by this idea that they all learn differently, and that is honored. And so you have allies all over the place, which is a really cool feeling. The faculty and staff explicitly encourage students to better understand their personal learning strategies. If you have difficulty in the bookstore doing something, they will coach you on how to do that. They're not going to judge you for being slow at managing your money or finding your card or losing something. They're going to help cue you on how you could do it better the next time. That is across the board, from dining hall staff to bookstore staff to resident deans to everyone in the classroom. So it's really a big community that understands learning in all corners of your life. So you're supposed to build this advocacy. So once a bookstore manager coaches you on how to order your books or select your books, they might say, well, what can you do next semester when you come in? So always coaching on that self-advocacy. And all of this is designed to help strengthen your self-confidence, not just in the fact that you can do something, but how you're going to do it. I'll joke with students that if they have difficulty following directions, they need to have the confidence in themselves to say, hold on, let me write this down. So we really help students build confidence in things that they do well and step in to advocate for themselves, which builds that sense of efficacy. All of this is really ideal for transfer students who come in with executive functioning skill challenges. We're going to talk a little bit more about EF skills in a minute. And it is very, very common. I have sort of my people, as I say, are students who often come to Landmark from another institution who, sometimes they've been successful, but they just haven't felt like it was a smooth journey, and they want to improve their skills so that it can feel better. And so they come to Landmark and then return to their home school, or they may decide that there's another place with a better fit, a smaller college or a different major. So students come for a variety of reasons, but we really are ideal for those transfer students who are looking to improve their process and really examine it and work on it. So living on campus. So in the 26 years that I've been at Landmark, and I was away for a little bit, and I like to say that because I returned. I love working at Landmark, and I love working with students who have so many interesting things to offer. But I started at Landmark working residentially. So I know exactly what it's like in the residence hall. Apart from having been a college student, which says something, I did work with a number of students. I lived in residence. I helped students, figure out how to organize their spaces. I coached them on how to get to the fitness facilities. This is all a part of what it means to be a college student. We have all of the facilities that a larger college has. Maybe they're not as big, but we've got them. If you want to take exercise classes, we have Zumba classes. We have, Tai Chi classes. We have yoga classes. So we have classes on campus. Currently, sometimes they're by Zoom, but we have some pretty inventive faculty. Most of our courses were held outside. There was an intro to communications course held outside in person all fall, and it was pretty awesome. Under a tent, wrapped in blankets, but getting it done in person. We have a lot of on-campus events. We've gotten super creative. Sometimes we have dog shows. We have lots of therapy dogs on campus. Sometimes we have spring fling, and we have all of those events, game days, bands, dances. We have a campus activity board that puts things together. And then we have the crown jewel, the thing that everybody loves, is the Drake Center for Academic Support. Crown jewel. I say that because most institutions will boast a learning center of some sort. And oftentimes those are very well staffed. But I will also say that oftentimes those are staffed with other students. At the Drake Center, we have some of the college founders working. At the Drake Center, we have veteran writing faculty. We have poet laureates working in the Writing Center. We have lots of very talented, exceptional educators working in the support center. And they are there not just to tutor students. The Drake Center is designed to help students learn the skills so that ultimately they can become more independent with their writing tasks or independent with their reading tasks. The idea is to not just help them get through the work, but to help them do the work on their own later on. So that's the goal of the Drake Center. Now, what does a bridge student experience schedule look like? Okay, well, it is pretty much like a first year student schedule, with the exception of the electives, which sometimes they could take at the 2,000, 3,000 level, depending on how many credits a transfer student might come in with. Or if they are using Landmark as a bridge into college, they would take a standard first year schedule. And it looks a bit like this. There is a required course called Perspectives in Learning. That is the course that I specialize in, really. It's our first year seminar course. It's that skills intensive course, but is also pretty heavily laden with theory about learning. We learn about habits and brain function and the law and advocacy and the 4 domains of learning, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. You'll also take a writing course. Some students will come in and take writing 1011, which is the standard composition and rhetoric course. But other students who come in or transfer with that first year writing course may take a course called research and analysis. So if you transfer your writing credits, then you can jump into that second level writing course. And then, of course, you will take 2 elective courses. And depending on what you come in with, you can take intro to communication or animal communication, or the radio station course, or interpersonal communication, or bio, or computer science courses. We have lots of electives that students choose from in their first semester. It can be pretty exciting. But this is what a standard course looks like, a course schedule looks like. So now what I want to do is I want to sort of launch into sort of the crux of why students choose to come to Landmark most of the time, sort of one of those core challenges that students come with, frankly, that all college students have going in. We just address them more explicitly. And then I'm going to move a little bit more deliberately into a framework that we use at Landmark to address all of this. So a lot of students come to Landmark and they have heard the phrase executive function. That they have difficulty with their executive function. They have executive dysfunction or executive functioning disorder or ADHD. But what we know is that executive functions happen sort of at this intersection of all sorts of diagnostic labels. Students with dyslexia can have executive functioning challenges. Students with ADHD can have a certain profile of executive functioning difficulties. And students with autism can have a certain profile of executive functioning difficulties. So we talk deliberately about what that is, and we examine what executive functions are, and we break it out. There's a couple of definitions. If you've attended any other presentations at Landmark, you will have seen this particular definition, that executive functions are a set of cognitive abilities that control and regulate other abilities and behaviors that are necessary for goal-directed behavior. So what does that mean? It means that when you are trying to write a paper, of which you are very capable to do the critical thinking, you have the ability to initiate the thinking about that paper and inhibit or stop thinking about the other things in your life, like the fact that we all have to go shovel snow up in New England. You can work on your paper and stop, inhibit those thoughts. So you have to initiate an activity and inhibit an activity. That you have to monitor. Am I on task with this paper? Am I on the right track? Have I gotten too far, into the weeds on this paper? Have I, forgotten to answer the second 2 prompts and I'm already on page 3? And can you monitor that and then change? Some of our students come in and they perseverate. They get stuck and they perseverate and they're not aware that they're perseverating. So monitoring all of that is an executive function. And they need to learn how to shift. And then the other piece is to then plan for future behavior when faced with that novel task. So what that means is, if you're working on this final paper and you have 2 other final papers to work on, you need to know how to expedite that process. You can't linger and perseverate. You have to monitor how you're doing and keep going, because somewhere in your prospective memory, you have to hold this idea that you have 2 other papers to write or 2 other projects to prepare for. All of that, all of those things, I think we can all recognize happen in our daily life when we're trying to do anything, that we have to initiate, stop actions, monitor and change, and plan for future behavior. So where did these executive functions come from? So in our courses, we not only talk about that previous definition of executive function, we address the brain functions behind all of it, sort of the brain networks that come into play here. And we talk explicitly about them in different frameworks. And this is what we do. I think over here on the right-hand side, you see the strategic networks, that how of learning. That's that prefrontal cortex, right? That's pre-FC. When people talk about the prefrontal cortex and your executive functions, that's where all your planning and performance happens. But what is that executive function controlling? It's controlling all of this stuff in the recognition networks and the affective networks. Okay, you need to be able to recognize. You have to have a store of information that you have to pull up. And that frontal lobe is what reaches back and pulls it forward for use. But likewise, you need that frontal lobe and that emotional affective network to make it valuable, to make it stick, so that you can store it in those recognition networks. So these 3 segments, when we're trying to learn, we're trying to tap into, what do you recognize? How can we assign value, emotional value? Why are we learning this? How is this relevant so we can stay engaged and motivated and store it and stay focused? So really, we talk, not only do we use this in the classroom, not only do we do activities, perhaps not as many as we did in 2019, but we'll get there. But we still have some pretty creative ways to help students stay engaged. I don't have them work at groups on the board, but everybody gets their own dry erase marker nowadays to head up and write things on the board so they can stay engaged, so they can create value of that information and stay focused. So again, we take this information and we use it to build our lesson, but quite often, this is our lesson. So students become more self-aware of how they learn, so that they can use it. They can visualize what they're supposed to be doing when they're learning. In that same vein, I'm going to talk about how we structure this first semester course called Education at EDU 1011. It used to be called Education, Self, and Community, but now it's called Perspectives and Learning. It is a required keystone course which taps into these executive functions through what we call the 4 domains of learning. It is a guided study of those theories. related to cognitive, social, emotional, and cultural dimensions of learning. And that is these 4 domains that you see here, right? We're talking about that cognitive piece with the brain, but we're also talking about social, emotional influences learning, cultural dimensions of learning, motivational beliefs in learning. And all of this comes along with a good chunk of self-reflection. I'm not just going to teach you this theory, but at every step, I'm going to ask you how this theory might play out in your world. How is it relevant to you, culturally or to your own personal experience? That reflection is constant in perspectives and learning, so that you're recognizing, it's like getting a manual to your brain. And that's pretty useful, I think. So that's the Perspectives and Learning course. It is modeled after this wheel that you see here. This is a homegrown framework at Landmark that guides both the Perspectives and Learning courses and our advising. And then a number of other course curriculums make use of it, making sure that we're always paying attention to students' social emotional growth, the growth of their academic skills, their self-regulatory behaviors, and their motivational beliefs. So what are some of the key goals of this course? Organizational systems, note-taking strategies. I know, note-taking. Who loves it? But lots of students discover that that is a really valuable way for them to stay engaged. And most students were never given the time to figure out how to do it in their own particular way. Perhaps they weren't developmentally ready when it was presented, and so they missed that train and were trying to catch up ever since. And so we present a note-taking system, and we ask them to try it, and then we ask them to tweak it, and then we ask them to do it again, and we give them time to do it, an opportunity to not do it well and to redo it, so that they can find a way that works for them. And that's the same with active reading. We talk with students about how to read academically. It's not just like reading a novel. Lots of students come in and they are regular readers. But it's not the same as academic reading. So we make that distinction. And we talk about how much work it takes and how much focus it takes and where you should do it and how you should do it. And then they have to decide, where should I do it and how should I do it? So we keep working on that. Assistive technologies. A lot of our students come in and they may have heard that they should use a live scribe pen. They may have heard that they should record their lectures. Or they may have heard that they should use Kurzweil or mapping systems, but they've never been given the opportunity to try it. And so many of the faculty, especially in Perspectives and Learning and the writing faculty, are familiar with Dragon or voice recognition software. The Drake Center, it can support all of these technologies. So students have gift of time is what we offer, to learn these things in order to achieve an assignment. There's been times where a student has taken a test and it became really clear to me that they should have used a screen reader. And so I'll say, do it again with a screen reader. And then we get to compare the two tests. And it's so great when they realize the benefit that they get from slowing down and using the screen reader. And then they become better advocates. And it just took a faculty member who allowed it and allowed for the tweaking. Other things we do in this class, this is my thing, wellness, exercise, nutrition, sleep, and all of its factors affecting learning and cognition. That's always been a big part of my classes. I mentioned that I was residential, and now you know why it's such a big part of my classes. I used to have students roaming the halls at 2 a.m. because they would wake me up, and then I would see them at class in the morning, and they just were not ready. And so I developed ways to address that, and it became very much an integral part of that curriculum. So people can think and be more mindful about how their out-of-class activities impact their in-class activities. We learn to summarize and critically analyze material, all that standard academic stuff. And we talk about the laws, how to protect yourself as a student who is neurodiverse. Some people may need to use it explicitly, and some people just need to have it in their back pocket. But teach it we do. And all of this is designed, again, to increase self-awareness and self-advocacy. It is what we do. Now, the writing composition class, the Comp and Rhetoric class, is the other required course. Again, we look to help students investigate and explore their writing process, to individualize it for themselves through reading and writing. A lot of that looks standard on a curriculum. I think it's just how we do it and the time we spend helping students uncover creative ways that they can, and give them permission to be creative with their writing process, that I think is a big part of what we do. We have a lot of work in our writing department, writing across the curriculum, where we all meet from different departments and come in and talk about how writing is all, you have to write across the curriculum, obviously, in science and in poli-sci and in the education courses or in the communication courses. Writing is everywhere. And so once students start to realize that they do write well, heck, with all the texting they do, they write, but how to transfer that from one discipline to the next is a big part of what we do. This curriculum also looks pretty similar, but it's designed to change the way you think about writing, to give you permission to write in the way you write, even if that's the lousy first draft. Breaking it apart and doing it in steps, paragraph by paragraph, starting at the end and moving to the beginning, starting in the middle. Practice with becoming a more fluent writer for yourself. Just write anything. And challenging themselves to separate what's good, because a lot of our students struggle with writing because they're perfectionists, they get stuck. And we want them to let go of that stuckness. Just write anything. Just get yourself to the desk and just start. And that learning to be a writer is never ending. Just like, you're always learning something. You're always learning how to improve your golf game. You're always becoming a more efficient swimmer or runner. You're becoming a different writer every day. You come to the table a different person every day, and so that process keeps evolving. And exploring the different kinds of writing. I think a lot of students come into college having been told that they're good writers because they are, but then they hit a wall when they're asked to do a different kind of writing. And they get super discouraged. And they don't realize that that's just a normal process. It's supposed to, if it wasn't hard, it wouldn't be schooly, it wouldn't be growing. So really exposing them to challenges in different kinds of writing is another piece of that course, which is pretty typical of first-year writing courses. But again, at Landmark, we're more explicit about what those challenges look like and how to persevere through them. And the last thing I want to talk about is that bigger picture at Landmark. We've talked about the courses we take. We've talked a little bit about what executive functions are and how we design the courses and the frameworks of the 4 domains. But now I just want you to see the big picture of what we have at Landmark. I talked about that community and how everybody really knows. Well, this is it. All students have faculty. All students have resident deans, and all students have an academic advisor, which is unlike academic advisors at other institutions, I assure you. All students have these 3 things, but we also have coaching services and counseling services and social pragmatic support and the coursework support, which is different than the Drake Center. The Drake Center is, again, that place where you can have a faculty member sit down with you one-on-one and help you apply the skills to an assignment in some way. Coursework support is for those students with executive functioning challenges who just have difficulty choosing one thing and doing it. the coursework support is just that monitored environment where you state your goal to someone and they say, okay, go. And then you dedicate that period to it. It can be really helpful. It's a dedicated space and time to do work, and students can develop really good habits that way. Social pragmatics is our peers group. That is a choice that some students can take at Landmark. That's for students who want to work with social conventions and understand a little bit more about that. And it's an explicit study, and it's a very it's actually a normed and approved program that we use at Landmark, peers. But students can choose to step into that. Our counseling service, again, specializes in students who are neurodiverse. So it's not just students who struggle with some anxiety or depression. It's students who have that coexisting with executive functioning challenges. Because those things coexist, they just do. And we don't always know which drives the other, because if you have difficulty with anxiety, you're going to have difficulty with executive function. But difficulty with executive function can cause difficulty with anxiety. So our counseling service is there to help tease that out for students a little bit further than the academic study and exploration that we do outside of those services. So there is this web, this web of support for students. And we all know what we're doing. Kind of cool. So we've been doing this program, this first year program, for a really long time. We've had bridge students. I've spoken with a number of them, and it's sad to see them go, but I know that they're better off when they go, better prepared. And so we have a cool thing today. We have a guest with us, Taylor Doxsee. He comes to us from the class of, he was here in 2012, and he's going to talk with you a little bit about his experience at Landmark. Yeah, and so I just want to hear from Taylor. Taylor, are you there?
I'm here.
Awesome. So jump on in and tell us a little bit about how it went for you.
Okay, so when I first came to Landmark, I was, a kid that didn't really know too much about what I was getting myself into. I knew that I had a learning disability, but I wasn't exactly sure how this was all going to come together for me as a learner, because school had been a very daunting task for me up until that point, which is a very common thread amongst other students at the time when I soon learned that right after moving in. So I made some very good connections that I'm still friends with today, that were managing and, just channeling those challenges through their time when they were at school. And since then, I had people that I was there with in classes that wanted to be there, but they needed a little bit more coaxing. So for me, I made a deal with myself, and that was that, I'm going to try to maximize this opportunity to the best of my ability. And right then and there, I was met with a fleet of very educated individuals that are mentors to me to this day, and I'm super, super thankful because without my time there, everything that my life has been since then would be impossible. This very task that you were talking about, as far as note-taking, internalizing information, those kinds of things. So for me, just paying it forward here, from everything that I got from there to help other people. We talk about self-advocacy and so forth. I really internalized that, and I'm like, how am I going to transition into the world with that message? So with that being said, I continue into my story of what I've been doing in the workforce and how that has come to be today. But that's kind of a little snippet of what what my experience was. There was always the ability to get help, right? And for the longest time, it always just felt like I was playing catch up before I arrived at Landmark. Always felt like, I was behind the eight ball, cognitively, right? So trying to learn how to slow down time, that they took that burden off of my shoulders. And like, look, if you come in the DCAS, we're going to help break this down for you. We're going to sit down and literally spend 45 minutes going over your entire assignment. So in conclusion, Landmark has taught me how to take achieving an assignment into achieving a goal. And that can mean a lot of things for a lot of different people. But for me, this was very important with the next line of work that I had envisioned going into. As I transitioned from one fall semester to the next, I was a competitive athlete. So, learning how to balance curriculum and being a competitive professional athlete was what I was trying to learn on the fly. But I was given that ability to do so from Landmark. So I'm very thankful. I'm always going to be for the rest of my life. So, yeah.
Taylor, I have a question. Can you think of any one specific moment when you were at Landmark? I think you mentioned being in the Drake Center and working on a paper, or was there anything else any specific lesson you remember, or even an assignment that you remember?
100%. 100%. I can think of many. So when I was at Landmark, I took a business class with Mr. Koskors and learned about the POLC, so business policy. So this is something that I've just dug my teeth into since I've been at Landmark. You just build a relationship with these educators, and you can tell that they really want to be there for you, to see you through that finish line, whatever it might be. So that business policy, product opportunity, leadership, and cost and all those kinds of things, just all the metrics of life outside of the collegiate world. That sunk into me, but it was more so how, I wanted to be around how they taught, how I could learn, how I can learn how to learn, no matter who it was. So, yeah, I can remember running to the DCAS after classes, because I'm I knew that I was going to be able to do everything that I needed to do for my requirements, and that it was a very two-way street. If you show the gumption to get something done, they're going to be there, and they will be there until the cows come home, So, yeah.
I love that you said that you used to run to the DCAS, because I do have to say, and I also love that you pointed out when you first started that some students needed a little bit more coaxing.
Yeah.
And that's totally true, because what's really funny is when I have students like you come back and talk to my first year students, I'll say, so what is something that you would have told your younger self? And every single one of them says, don't, go to the DCAS early and often. Just go. Because students will not do that right away because they're nervous. Right. But I have another follow-up question, and that is, So can you talk a little bit about what you do now? And if you can think about a specific, like you sort of took the note-taking thing, like something that, I don't know how to say this, but I mean, self-advocacy comes in a lot of forms, but after it just becomes the fabric of your life, it's no longer advocacy, it's just what you do, right?
Right.
So can you think about one thing that maybe you started doing at Landmark as someone's coaching that you still do in your work? But first tell a little bit about what you do and how your experience has played out in that arena.
Okay. So one of the main things that I, would say that it has helped me do what I do today is the knowledge of how to create a consistent, resilient, and developmental mindset. And what that means for having perspective or awareness. To your point earlier, how you can be conducting yourself in an efficient way, right? Being aware of your time management and all of those things, right? So I am a personal trainer and a licensed massage therapist. I had transitioned into an accelerated program because I knew that the fitness space was what I would like to transition into the workforce, and I just applied it with my skiing background. I would work with people on the ski hill, and then I would work with people in the gym and provide exercise routines, nutritional guidance, all of those things. And I still do those today. Now I am working in a stem cell practice, working under a ND, and we work with a vast array of different kinds of patients. So I help people get stronger after helping their body and joints rehabilitate. So there's a lot of different things that I do to help people get back to a life that they're happy with and that they remember. And that in a different sense, that's what Landmark has helped me with. They saw an opportunity to provide somebody with the skills that they need to go on to the next stages in their life. So,
that really is great to hear. And it's funny, after all these years, to hear you say those words, it's right out of the curriculum, right? So what you said, you were not in my perspectives and learning class, but it's very clear to me that you took it, because all of the things you said about task management and resilience and mindset, that's right out of the curriculum. So I'm psyched that you took that right into your workplace. So that is thrilling for me to hear as someone who helped design the curriculum. It is thrilling to see that it worked for you.
I gotta tell you, I mean, when I got to school at that accelerated program in Florida, I literally told my theory instructor and practical instructor, Landmark, the skills that I learned there, as far as highlighting my notes in different colors, so my brain can cognitively reconcile with that when it comes time to take a test.
Right.
All of that stuff I still do today. So thank you. It's just wild to be having this conversation and telling it back to the educator, because I've been telling people about Landmark and what they gave me, ever since I left. It's never skipped a beat, so yeah, I sometimes get a loss of words because there's just such a infinite mindset that I've indoctrinated, from this from the school. So, yeah, I don't know. Cool. I could literally go on, but yeah.
Well, I think you and me both. That's really cool. And again, for anybody watching, Taylor was not my student, so we've actually just met on this podcast, this webcast. But in fact, you do speak our language, and that is just fantastic to hear. So we'll connect later, Taylor. But I'm going to move on and tell the audience a little bit about what to do next if they're interested in looking into a bridge program at Landmark. So, there's some dates to be mindful of. If you want to join us at Landmark, cost, we have financial aid available. We have the spring class obviously is coming in. And to be honest, I'll tell you what, we know that students are finishing their fall semester, and it may be difficult, and it is not really uncommon for students to come to Landmark in the spring because their fall has been difficult. And they're going to use the spring as a bridge to whatever comes next for them. So we know that it's right about this time that, families are really thinking about, do you want to keep chugging away and working that hard, wherever you are? And we also have a summer bridge program. The summer bridge program is obviously over the summer. They're shorter term. I can't remember if they're credited or not, but we also have shorter transition experiences that have some skills. It's not as in-depth and as rich as a full semester, but certainly some students just need a little bit of tweaking, and that summer bridge experience is also fantastic. We do have an application process. This is contact information. I believe you can get access to this PowerPoint, or it's pretty easy to go to the Landmark website and go to the admissions at landmark.edu. We're super supportive in the application process as well. So I know if you have executive functioning difficulties, getting an application completed is pretty daunting. So we support you through that too. It's just kind of comes with what we do. We understand that it's difficult, and so we will help you through that. We do hope that students have psychoed testing. If you don't have it, it's something we can talk about, but it is really helpful. And that is unique to Landmark. It is part of the admissions process because we want to know exactly what you need help with. It's not going to exclude you. It's something that is very much going to help you walk in the door. So SATs are not required, and it's a rolling admission. So our bridge program is here for students when they need it, if they need it. So we encourage you to join us and join us for what can be the most powerful and propelling semester of your life. All of these are students in the past who have come for bridge semesters and gone on to be propelled themselves into successful college and occupation. So thank you for joining us. And I know, Mark, if you're still here, I don't know if anybody has any questions posed, but Taylor and I are here to answer them.
Yes, we do. We have quite a few questions, actually.
Awesome.
Since you mentioned Summer Bridge, I was just going to add that there are 2 tracks for Summer Bridge. There's a non-credit developmental track, and then there is a credit option as well. And it's a 5-week session in the summer. So first question, I think both Rebecca and Taylor, I think you can both give some perspective, and I think you have a little bit already. But the first question is, how do we know that students can transfer these skills to another environment after they leave?
Well, I can say that we don't know that for sure. I mean, to be honest, I don't know that. But the whole point is that when students are there, that's part of the self-monitoring, right? Like self-monitoring is an executive function. And it's not beyond me to tell a student that I think they're ready to launch, and that sometimes I'll tell them that they're totally ready to launch. If I think a student is ready, but that doesn't mean they are or they're not. It just is my opinion. But I think practice, my job is to have students struggle and recover. I will tell students if they don't struggle and fail a little bit in my class at something and recovered from it, then I haven't done my job, because that's what life is about. And so frankly, if I see a student struggle and recover a couple times, I feel like they can probably generalize that elsewhere. Taylor, you want to jump in?
Sure. Okay, so right off the bat, it was very clear to me that as a student, and I'm going to try to answer this in the most unbiased way possible, because people that come to Landmark with different learning differences and so forth. So regardless of that, what's very, very apparent is, like I was saying earlier, the showmanship of wanting to help make that semester the most propelling semester, to your point, Rebecca, is just that. I mean, we have to come to that 50-50, right? And then once you come to that 50-50, both parties need to meet themselves at 75%. Now, you're probably thinking, how does that work? You both got to be intertwined. You both have to be very on top of how one schedule can work with the other. So how does that apply to the real world? Scheduling meetings, managing your investments, working with different kinds of people that are going to be in your life for real world things, such as managing your money, such as managing your professional life, etc. So, what really strikes home, is how do you transfer your skills from the school to real world? Could mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, because they're starting at various stages. You had mentioned earlier, how you have guys, girls transferring from other schools. Also, this is their first real college experience. But as far as providing paths such as technology, such as science, all of those things, they're becoming more prevalent. Since I've left Landmark, they've become very much so with the new development there on campus. So it gives guys and gals a perspective on, okay, I can apply this to an occupation rather than it just being reading, writing, arithmetic, etc.
All right, Mark, you have another question?
I do. Okay, so I'm going to add, I have some questions that are kind of related. So I'm going to ask them in a related way. Okay, so the first part is, to what extent do you mentor the independent living skills piece? So how much of that does a student already need to have? There's another separate question asking about the difference between the bridge experience and the TAC program for high school students. So Rebecca, I'll let you talk about that and explain the living and learning experience and how these two programs are different.
Okay. So the living and learning experience, so all students come to college and they have your basic residential staff, as all colleges have residential staff. I think the thing that is different at Landmark is how our residential staff is trained, right? So right off the bat, we're going to be coaching students a little bit differently in the halls, having interventions that are a little bit different in the halls. And that is how we coach students through their living experience, their learning experience, and how it applies to their academics. In the classroom, I'm also asking students to reflect on their life outside of the classroom. I'm not just asking them to, reflect on the content. I might say, how could you apply this outside? So it's the residential life the residential life staff is asking students to reflect on how what they're doing now is going to, impact their schooling. And when I'm in my classroom, I'm asking that same question, reaching back up. And I keep doing this thing because our campus is on a big hill, and so all of our students live up the hill, and all of the academics are down the hill. So I see it after 25 years. I see it that way. The TAC program is a separate program. It is much more intensive. Students who participate in the TAC program have regular meetings with a TAC advisor, which is a little bit more deliberate for students who might need more deliberate guidance in the res hall for that independent living. So creating a schedule for doing laundry, because maybe they have difficulty with that executive function or organizing that. It is just another level, but it is a separate program that needs to be sort of, you have to sign up for it very specifically. Whereas the rest is just looks like at other colleges, just they're much more highly educated about neurodiversity.
Yeah, so I hope the two folks who answered that, or who asked those questions, that explained the difference and why there's a residential component, more of a residential support component for TAC. Is that correct, Rebecca? Okay,
one extra thing. So during my time there, I saw the progression with individuals that required that service. Over the course of a semester, I saw that progression become a little bit more independent, with different individuals. So it is possible, we all come to Landmark at different stages, with different, things that they are working on, and it's very doable, because patience is something that Landmark is very familiar with, and no matter what you're working on or what you're trying to achieve.
Thanks, Taylor. And so another question about residential living. The question is, do bridge students live in separate housing from students in the other programs? And the answer is no. I don't know if you want to say anything else about that, Becca.
No, I think if it's a student who's older, they can apply for some of the suite style living. But for the most part, no, it's not. They're not separate. Not at all.
Great. How would the bridge experience be appropriate for a student who isn't sure if they want to go to college at all, or do they need to be pretty sure about their direction into post-secondary education?
That's kind of a tricky question. I think if a student is unsure about whether they want to attend college, Landmark is a college. That's something that they have to understand, is that they're going to be attending colleges and buying books and writing papers. And yes, we do it all a little bit differently. Some of it's more experiential and we're more patient. But the idea is that they want to be in higher education. And then that's a goal. To that end, however, there are plenty of students who then take those skills and apply them to other certification programs. So, it's not uncommon for us to work with students who want to go into fire science. And that's a completely different kind of degree, but they need to learn how to study or manage their time or do any of those things. But they have to be willing to do that work in a college classroom.
And I think that's Taylor's experience, right? Taylor, you went into a certification program for personal training.
That's right. So it was 4 years of school condensed down into 4 months' time. And you're probably thinking, okay, how did you even retain any of that information, right? Right out of school, it was, I'd be talking to a prospective client and I would say things that I knew, but I didn't even remember that I knew them. So, when it comes to being able to sit down, internalize a lot of information, that is what Landmark is very good at doing, is providing people with the skills to do just that. So that, and also with the Massage Therapy Institute that I went to learn those skills and apply them.
Yeah.
Great.
Mark,
So,
I do want to just add before you go there is we do work off of a strengths-based model, really. So while we do work with students on how to be better college students, we also want them to discover their strengths so they can find a good fit when they move forward, which is what it looks like Taylor found a good fit. And I think that that's the important point to come out of this, is that a student needs to be willing to go into the college program and do the college work, but then they may find through our program something that may be a slightly better fit. Does that make sense? I don't know if that adds to that answer at all.
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you. Go ahead, Taylor.
I will add, the premise of going into that program for sports medicine is, a very vast world. So going into that, just getting that start, right? So going to Landmark was getting that start for X, Y, and Z as a learner. The next component there for seeing which aspects of sports medicine that I wanted to truly diversify and specialize in was the goal, right? So there was a goal on the other end of that goal, which was achieving accreditation for a personal trainer, and then going into the massage therapy and the manual therapy and those kinds of things helps target how I can best provide people with what they need, as far as their healthcare goes.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. Excuse me. So we are a little bit past our time. We do have some other questions. I would love to be able to sort of rapid fire them out at you guys, if you don't mind. Becca, why is the bridge experience ideal for transfer students?
That's a great question. It's really good for transfer students coming in or going out.
Doesn't say, but I would assume, I think earlier you may have referenced that in spring we had a lot of transfer students coming in from someplace else.
So here's what often happens, and this is the classic bridge student, is they've gone to another school. Sometimes they have been perhaps disinvited back for another semester, or they receive a probationary letter because they're struggling, or sometimes students just struggle and they're not feeling good about how it's going, and they may want to transfer to another institution. Well, going to another institution, another traditional institution, may not be the fix right away if you don't know what's keeping you from finding your groove. And so I guess my whole point is that you kind of come to Landmark and you can figure out how to find your groove. Like, what is my work pace? What are my best work strategies? And then all of a sudden you can find that good fit that I mentioned before. You can be more deliberate about choosing your next college, or you can choose to stay, or you can choose to go into a certification program. Like, my whole point is you're looking for the best fit. That's why it's ideal for transfer students. Done.
Perfect. Thank you.
Next.
Sorry, I was having trouble finding my unmute button. Next question. If a student is not quite on the college level for writing, will they have a difficult time in the writing class?
Yes, we do have a non-credit start, and that has a developmental writing course in it, and that is often recommended. We have a number of students who have been really successful, in large part because they started in that non-credit developmental space, which gave them even more time to practice and get up to speed so that they were not swamped and overwhelmed when they got into the 1,000 level and then the 2,000 level. That they, to build those foundational skills. We do that, but if they're really far behind and not quite there, they might want to start at the non-credit level. But that's a placement question, and we address that in our admissions process.
Great. Next question is about financial aid. Is the FAFSA application available for the bridge experience?
I have no idea.
So I would say yes, because you apply for financial aid when you enter into the college. So I believe that's true, although I don't want to say definitively that it is. So we will try to. I will find the person who asked that question and email an answer to you.
I would never wish the FAFSA on anyone voluntarily.
And the final question is, can you start as a bridge student and then stay on to complete a degree? Yeah,
and that happens also. Oftentimes students, I had a student this semester who came as a junior. She had been very successful at another college, but she really started to struggle at the end and couldn't find her groove and felt really dissatisfied. And so she came to Landmark for a semester, established an internship on campus, and is choosing to come back for the spring. And then I think she'll return once she feels really confident in her advocacy, which is really what she came for. But who knows? We have plenty of students who then choose to stay on for the degree. So.
And back to the FAFSA question, I have one of my helpers texted me that yes, financial aid is available for the bridge experience. So we are at a time. We thank you all for joining us tonight, whether you're watching us on Conduit or on Facebook. We do have several more webcasts coming up on Thursday evenings in January. The next one is going to be on January 7th. That will specifically be about financial aid and the admissions process. And on January 14th, we'll have one on student engagement at Landmark College. And on January 28th, we have a really exciting one about the experience of hybrid learning, which everyone, of course, is immersed in right now. So we'll have some of our folks from our research institute in our online dual enrollment program talking about this conundrum of how to learn in a face-to-face setting and learn online, or just learning online, as so many people are doing right now in the pandemic. So thank you again for joining us tonight about the bridge experience. If you have any questions, please email us at admissions@landmark.edu. I want to thank our presenters, our presenter, Rebecca Maddie, and our guest, Taylor Doxsee. You guys were great. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.